What do I need a microphone for? For goodness sake, was that an amazing movie? Thanks everyone for coming and for hanging around, seeing that beautiful print of Shay. I've never seen that look so beautiful before. My God, the sound was just fantastic watching John lose his mind with his elbows on the keyboard and everything. Well, we are in for certainly a special treat here because like no other screening in the entire country, we are thrilled to have a man who was such a huge part of the Beatles live experience and is joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Larry Kane. Larry, I'm going to take my spot as I'll be Phil Donahue down here running around, but I'm going to have you up here on the stage.
Hello.
I'll be able to answer questions.
Before we go any further, I got to introduce some friends.
Please do, sir.
Are the Butlers here? Are they here? Well, I wanted to thank everybody from KYW who supported me in this project. And that's why
Outstanding. Larry, we'll have a few minutes here before, because it's a 10:15 screening, we'll have a few minutes to take your questions you might have for Larry, having seen this movie. So if you're interested in asking Larry a question, raise your hand and maybe just like line up here behind the guy we call Beetle Bill, Bill B. We love Beetle Bill, and we'll answer as many questions as we can in the time allotted. We'll probably have about 20 minutes. But Larry, first thing, congratulations on your appearance in this film. It's obviously such a huge part of the Beatles experience. What I would love for you to tell us is, tell us about your trip to London, because you were on the blue carpet on Wednesday. A lot of us were watching it on Facebook Live. He was being interviewed. Tell us about that trip.
it was kind of amazing. I arrived there on Tuesday morning, and the next morning they took me to Abbey Road, and they had me do 10 interviews with radio stations all around the world. And who should walk in but Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. And we took some pictures and chatted about the movie. And Ringo said, who looks better, Larry, me or you? I said, I think I do. And he said, Larry, there's no way. And he said, we're still kidding you now like we did then. And I saw Paul in the after party with his wife, and Ringo with his wife, and spent a lot of great time with Ron Howard. And let me tell you something, I saw the first take of the movie in April, and it was spectacular then. It's much more spectacular now. My wife and I were invited to a private screening on Park Avenue, and the first thing I saw was that I was in the movie a lot. And I said, what are they thinking of? And I met the producers and Nigel Sinclair, spent some time with Ron Howard, and as the months progressed, they kept asking me to do what they call pickup lines, where you go on and you do a line. So we used a studio in Philadelphia called Sign Studios on 22nd Street. Is anybody here from Sign? They're coming to the second show, no question. And, the quality of the sound was matched to the quality in Hollywood. So for me, it was a very humbling experience to be able to take this job I didn't want to do, go on tour with them, write about them over the years, get to know them, and to me it's sort of a closure to be part of this project. And I do believe that the one thing that will happen because of this movie is that it will introduce to people who are 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, 50 years old, who weren't there, what it was like in the beginning and how it came about. You know, in Adelaide, Australia, there were only 800,000 people in the city. 400,000 of them showed up. So it's amazing.
One more question for you before we take it to our esteemed audience as well. Did you have a chance to talk with Paul or Ringo at the after party and get their thoughts on what they thought about the film? Because that was the first time they had seen it too.
Well, they'd seen parts of it, but Paul, let me explain to you what the after party was at. It was at a place called the Banquet Hall, which is right around from Buckingham Palace. The good news is I don't eat meat. And the good news is that everything they served there was vegetarian because of Paul McCartney. So I walked back and there was a roped off area where Paul and his wife and Ringo and Olivia Harrison were. And as I walked back to the area, Paul took the rope apart and said, come on in. And we chatted for about 20 minutes about the movie. And it was very humbling because he said, you know, it's the first time I've seen the whole thing, and I must tell you, you brought a lot of life and emotion to that movie, and we really appreciate it. remember the time we talked about our moms, and I was so happy they got a picture of my mom in the movie. That was, believe it or not, at my bar mitzvah. She was throwing a kiss to everybody. And so it was an emotional time. London was just so hectic. They had me go to Manchester. Now, Manchester is in the northern part of the country. But unlike our trains here, the trains there are very fast. And you can get there in about an hour and 45 minutes. And I was on a show called BBC Breakfast, which has 3 million viewers. It's the biggest show in England. And it was fascinating, the questions they asked. One question I was never asked, I did about 240 interviews over the last 6 weeks. One question I was never asked was, what effect did the Beatles have on you? And I did say, first of all, I learned how to travel. I learned how to wash clothing in a sink. I learned to be much more outgoing. And the Beatles actually brought me to Philadelphia. Nobody really knows that story. In 1964, and 65 and part of 66, my broadcasts were syndicated to stations around the country. And in 66, a station near WFIL radio, it's called Famous 56, was hiring, and they hired me as their assistant news director. 3 months later, I went out in the streets as a reporter for TV, and 3 years later, I was the anchorman. So.
Larry, I know we have a lot of folks here who want to ask you some questions here. If you wouldn't mind stepping on over. Bill, you have the microphone ready to go?
Yes.
Just tell them, Larry.
Yes, here we go.
All right, your name and your question for Larry, please.
My name is Nicole, and Larry, watching the movie, it mentioned you were 21 years old when you were asked to go on the road with the Beatles. So you were in the correct demographic to be a fan, but I didn't get the impression you were that enthused about it. Were you a fan of their music prior to going
I
on
love
the
their
road?
music. I heard I was going from St. Louis to Miami to take a new job on December 26, 1963. And in those days, you couldn't get satellite radio or get big signals. You didn't have people like this guy on the air. And so every town, the sound would go out. And whether I was in Paducah, Kentucky, or Nashville, Tennessee, the Beatles' I Want to Hold Your Hand was constantly on. I love the song, I love their music. I just didn't think that a news guy should be traveling with a band. And neither did my father, who said, watch yourself because they'll pollute you. But my mom, in April or May, knew that I was going. And she told me that these guys are great, they're going to be big, and this could be an important part of your career.
Next question for Larry, please.
Hi Larry, this is Mary Louise from New Jersey. It's more of a comment than a question. Being around the Beatles for as long as you had for that period of time, was it interesting to see the differences in their senses of humor and their personalities?
Great personalities. The sense of humor partly comes from living in Liverpool, where almost everybody is like them. They call you dear and honey and sweetheart. They're very, 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 very kind. The first time I met their sense of humor was the first time I met John Lennon, when he looked at my shoes, to my head, and my clothing, and for those of you who are old enough, I was wearing a Robert Hall suit. See, we now know they're over 60, and, which was the cheapest suit you could buy for the confirmation of bar mitzvah. And John looked at me and he said, who are you and what planet do you come from? He said, you look like a round peg in a square hole. You, my friend, are a nerd from the 1950s. So I said, you, my friend, are a slob from Liverpool. And then I started asking him about the war in Vietnam. And there were race riots going on about immigration in England. And he lit up. And as I was walking down the hall, he came to run after me and grabbed me, pulled me around, hugged me, and said, I'm really looking forward to traveling with you. I'm sorry about our slight altercation.
Listen to me.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
What's the question for Larry?
How you doing, Larry? Mark from Philadelphia. I just wanted to say I really like the book Ticket to Ride. I read it when I was like a kid. It's a great book. My question is, what was the latest time you had contact with John Lennon?
Last time I had contact with John Lennon was about 3 months before he died. He had come to Philadelphia, in 1975 to do a charity marathon at Channel 6. And for those of you who want to see it, it's on YouTube. He did the weather on the station that night. It was the worst and best weather forecast ever on Channel 6. It's interesting though, I asked him a question. I said, what kind of music are you listening to now? And he said, I'm liking the Beatles. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm sort of feeling that we were better than we thought we were. And we might last. And he said, I'm also collecting anything Beatles that's out there. I just thought it was fascinating that he separated the Beatles from his own life at that point.
Unbelievable. Larry, it's you.